Welcome to Exploring the Variable Site Part 6, Full Page Hotspots, Highlighting Divs. Today we're going to enhance our demo with some on-screen output and get all of these divs to highlight when my cursor moves either under them, over them, or on top of them up here. Let's get into it. So we left off last time with this demo where we could move our mouse around and we could output the clamped value, the normalized value, and what quadrant we're in. And we did that by passing our x value into the handle pointer function, and then we created a new x variable which allowed us to clamp that x, and then we updated new x by normalizing the previous value of new x, and then we updated new x again by taking its current value, running it through this condition, multiplying it by 4, and flooring it to get our quadrant. And along each step of the way, we were logging out the clamped, normalized, and quadrant based on these updated values of new x. And when we moved our mouse around, clearly we could see those values update in the console. Well, after creating this lesson, I realized it would be very helpful to be able to see these values somewhere other than the console and maybe just see them, boom, right here. So in order to do that, what I did was I created this updated demo here where all the code is virtually the same, but I updated it so that I could see my min x, max x, and of course the clamped, normalized, and current quadrant wherever I was while I was moving my mouse. Now to do that, I needed to have distinct variables for clamped, normalized, and quadrant. So you'll see here that once we pass in the value of x, what I did was I created a clamped value that ran x through the clamp function, and then I created a normalized value which ran clamped through normalize, and then I created a quadrant value that did our flooring of the normalized value. So now that I have these three distinct values, I can go down here where I'm updating my output with this big string, and all the code here updates everything that we see right over here. So again, we're doing all the same calculations, it's just that I made three new variables. And I think doing it this way will make this file here much more pleasant to look at instead of having to stare at those console values updating all the time. Now, of course, to do this, I also had to update the HTML a little bit, but it's all fairly straightforward. I've added a tooltips div that contains the min x and max x values. And below my main div, you'll see that we have a simple output div. It's just a single div where we're outputting this complex string of all those values when they update. And for a quick little overview of the new JavaScript code that I added for this, I want you to see that we have a clamped, normalized, and quadrant variable set up here. And then min_xl refers to the DOM element that's going to contain the value, and the same thing for max_l. And output, of course, points to output. On initial load, min_xl is getting its text content updated with the current value of min_x, and also max_xl is doing the same for max_x. And with that out of the way, let's move into highlighting the appropriate divs. To help us get right into the fun code, I've made a few updates to help us get started. I'm keeping track of a highlight color for when we're over a div, and then we have the normal color that we'll revert to. I created an array of highlight divs, which is just every div inside of main, which again are our numbered divs right here. Now, in order to keep track of which div is active and which divs need to be turned off, I've added a new div variable and a current div variable. And you'll see how we're going to use those very shortly. So let's jump into our function here where we're doing all of our calculations to figure out which quadrant we're in. Once we figured that out and we've outputted everything, I'm going to come down here and update my new div variable by going into the highlight divs array and pulling out the div at an index of quadrant. And then I'm going to add some code to highlight that new div. And I'm going to do that with a GSAP.toTween where the target is going to be new div, and we're just going to animate the background color to my highlight color with a duration of 0.2. So now when I move over here, Watch what happens. 3 lights up immediately when my mouse is over here, and that's what we want. Whenever I'm in this padding section, that's going to trigger div 3. Now when I move to div number 2 or quadrant 2, boom, it gets highlighted, and again it gets highlighted all the way to 0. So now I've figured out how to highlight the appropriate div, but you'll notice that none of them are turning off. But before we fix them turning off, I want to point out another problem. Let's go into the console, and I want to show you that while I'm moving my mouse around, we're getting a lot of console logs. Let's just clear, and I'm just going to move a little bit, and we get all of those highlight new div messages coming out. It's ridiculous. Well, the reason for that is because this is what we've told it to do, all right? Every time we move our mouse, we're calling the handle pointer function, and we're going to find the new div, and then we're just logging it out, and we're going to always create this new animation. So that's quite inefficient and could be problematic. So I only want to highlight a new div if there's a new div to highlight. And the way we're going to handle that is we're going to compare our new div value to whatever the previous or current div was, okay? And now you may remember that I very quickly pointed out that we are creating new div and current div values up here. So every time I highlight a new div, I'm going to set the current div value equal to new div. So now I'm only going to highlight a new div if the new div is different than the current div. And to do that, we're going to add a little conditional statement here. I'll say if new div is not equal to current div, then what I'll do is highlight the new div. So I'll just take this code here, I'm going to cut it out, and inside this condition, I'll paste that new code. Now let me go ahead and clear the console, and when I get to quadrant 3, we highlight it, and if I move my mouse under quadrant 3, we're not getting a whole bunch of console logs or new tweens created until I move until, boom, section 2. And again, I can go under 2, move around all I want, and we're not doing any unnecessary tweens. And not until I move into 1 will we get a new highlight and a new console log. So now that we know when it's safe to highlight a new div, we can go ahead and turn off the current div. To diminish the current div, let's go right here in this condition, and I'm going to create a GSAP.toTween that targets the current div and will animate its background color to our normal value with a duration of 0.2. So now let's go ahead, clear the console, move into the zone, and we get an error. GSAP target undefined, not found. Okay, let's keep an eye on that. Well, as I'm still moving, you'll see that I'm not getting any more errors. Nothing's going crazy. And when I go to div 2, aha, we highlighted a new div and we diminished or turned off the current div, which was 3. If I go back to 3, 2 turns off, and this is going to work all the way through. Pretty nice. Now the only thing we have to really address is why am I getting this error here? Well, the reason for that is because when I'm trying to tween current div here, current div is not defined yet. Remember, we're setting it up out here outside of the handle pointer function, and it doesn't have a value. So when we do this conditional logic, we assign new div a value, and that new value is not equal to current div's value of nothing at all. So then this code goes to run because current div has not yet been assigned a value. That only happens down here once we've animated our new div to its highlight color. So the only thing we need to do to clean up this code here is make sure that there is a current div. So we can do that quickly by just wrapping this tween inside of another conditional where we check if current div exists, then we'll create this tween. So I'm just going to take this out, cut it, paste it in here. And let's make our window a little bit wider so we can actually focus on the code here. Maybe I'll tighten things up a little bit. And now let's go ahead, clear the console, and I shouldn't get any errors. Move my mouse, we highlight the new div, which is 3, no errors at all. We go to 2, 3 turns off, and we go back and forth. We're not getting any unnecessary logs in my console, which means we're only tweening elements when we need to. Whenever we roll over a new quadrant, the new div gets highlighted and the current div turns off. Exactly what we want. So we covered quite a lot today. It's a nice place to wrap up. Things are working very nicely, but I do want to point out that this is not responsive, meaning that if after page load I go and make the window wider, you'll see my max X did not update at all. And as I move my mouse into zone 2 or quadrant 2, nothing happens until I get about where? Here, okay? Things are still using the old coordinates of before I resized. So don't worry, we'll come back, we'll fix that, and we'll move on to incorporating all the good code into our demo with the curve and the interactive stages. See you next time.